Hello, guys. I think today it's become very important for me to give some very important teaching. And the teaching for today is how to prevent stunting, or what some people call runts in catfish farm. Now, when this happens, you would fail to meet your target size. Now, remember, the target of our farm and most catfish farms is simply we want to aim to reach 0 to 1 kg in 3 to 6 months. And this is the target, and this is what would ensure profitability, being able to provide workers with their salary, investors with their return on investments, also provide workers with welfare, accommodation, food, company vehicles, all of the things that a business needs. So you must prevent stunting or runting or grunting or stunted growth, so that you can get to table size. Now, why it's important is if you don't prevent this, you end up with runt or stunted growth. You would end up with melange. Melange. The problem is melange. Now you cannot sell at the rate. So if you get your fish to an average weight of 1 kg, in most parts of Nigeria, you can sell them for anything between 3,200 to 4,000 naira around Abuja axis. So that means profitability is ensured, and all of the things I've talked about. Investors are taking care of, workers are taking care of their salary, their welfare, their health insurance, and all of those things. If there's stunting, you end up with melange. So I'm going to explain how some of the things that causes stunting. And there are a few of them. The very first is, the quality of the seedlings. So where you get seedlings from matters. So when you get seedlings from appropriate breeders, this you can easily deal with. The second is the feeding, and I'll dwell on this significantly. The third is water quality. And the fourth is control of disease within the farm. And if you like, you can call that biosecurity. And that's internal and external. Now, we've talked about this so that we don't end up with melange, which means you can only sell them for around 1,500, 1,800 per kg, significantly losing about 40% of their worth. Now, so we've talked about seedlings. So seedlings, when you get the seedlings in the right place. So how do you prevent stunting or runting or grunting from proper feeding? Now, it depends on the stage. So for simplicity, if you get your seedlings from fries, it's useful to feed fries frequently and at the right quantity. So there are basically two methods. So remember, frequency and quantity. So and that's also using quality feed. So it's volume and frequency. So there are basically two methods for feeding. One is the feeding until they get full. So feeding based on acceptability. So that's the feeding based on acceptability. The second feeding type for any animal is precision feeding. Yeah, or what you can apply in catfish farm called biomass feeding or percentage body weight feeding. And I explained that shortly. Now, with that said, when you have frays, you want to feed them frequently. Now, if you are doing the feeding based on acceptability, you keep giving them feed until they no longer accepting it. For frays, it's sensible to feed your frays. I recommend around 4 times a day, especially if you have good water change. So you feed them morning and afternoon twice, and you feed them afternoon and evening twice. Now, if you want to do the precision feeding for frays, it's a different approach. So what you want to do is you want to know the total weight of the frays. It's probably difficult to count them, but if you know the total weight of the frays, if you have a way of calculating that, you need to feed frays with 6 to 8% of their body weight. Yeah, daily. So so I'm going to do some calculations here so that we appreciate what I'm talking about. So you need to feed the frays so you want to feed so let's say the total weight of the frays is 100 kg, and you need to feed them with 8% of their body weight. Yeah, so if you multiply, so that means you're going to multiply 100 by 0.08. So let's do that. 0.08 multiplied by 100. So that's going to give you, so if their weight is 100 grams, so that's going to give you 8 grams. So what you should be feeding your frays with on a daily is 8 grams divided by 4. So you want to feed them 2 grams. Yeah. In the morning, afternoon, evening, noon, and night. Yeah, so if it's 100,000, that would mean 20 grams. So that's how you approach the precision feeding. The next growth stage is the juveniles, which is recommended you feed at least 3 times a day. Again, the same principle. You can use feeding based on acceptability, and you can use precision feeding based on the weight. Now, for juveniles, it may be easier to count them. So let's say the average weight of each juvenile in the pond is 1 gram, and you have, if you are quite a big farm, you have 5,000. So that means you have 5,000 grams. Yeah, that's the total. Now you want to find out how much should you be feeding them. So for these, most people would recommend, for if you want to do precision feeding, 4 to 6% of body weight daily. So again, you say fine. If you are using 6%, it means you're going to do 0.06, yeah, times 5,000 multiplied by 5,000. So you need to feed them with 300 grams. If you have these 5,000 juveniles weighing an average of 1 gram, 300 grams, daily. And you divide that into 3 portions. So you're going to feed them with 100 grams in the morning, 100 grams in the afternoon, and 100 grams in the evening. This will allow uniform growth and uniform, acceptability. Of course, after the juvenile stage, they go into the grow out ponds, and then you begin to need to sort them to various sizes. Then in the grow out stages, so jumbo, super jumbo, whatever you call them, you generally can go down to feeding 2 to 3 times a day. And in this stage, you can maintain the 4 to 6%, or you can feed with 2 to 4%. Remember, you can feed with acceptability. The challenge with feeding with acceptability is that you need someone to consistently feed until they stop accepting. And it may be challenging for big farms where you want a process that ensures that there is continuity. Fine. And so that means, let's say the 5,000, you've sorted them to different ponds, and you have 1,000 for each pond. Yeah. So let's say now you have 1,000 pieces in one of your pond, and each of those is weighing 40 grams. So therefore you end up with 40,000 grams or 40 kg. Yeah. Again, you do the same thing. So you are using 4%. So you're going to say 0.04 multiplied by, if you like, 40 kg or 40 grams. Either one is fine. So that means you need to feed them with 1.6 kg or 1.6 kg in a day. Now that would, if you divide that into 2, that comes to 800 grams. Yeah, for all of the 1,000 fish weighing on an average of 40 grams in the morning and evening. So how do you weigh the fish? So from a practical point of view, you do what is called sampling. So that's very popular in statistics. So what you do is you cast the net randomly, and the number of fish that comes out, at least they should be around 5. You take their average weight, add them up. You take their weight, add them up, and divide by the number. So let's say, let me just illustrate that. So you take, let's say you randomly catch. So you have 50, the smallest, plus say 90, plus 70, plus 110, plus say 40. Now you add all of these up. So that's 50 plus 90, that's 140, plus 70, that's 210, plus 110, that's 320, that's now plus 40, that's 360. So you divide 360 by 5. So 70. So you could, that's just for illustrating purpose, but I used 40 in my calculation. But this is how you do that, because people would ask me, so how do you know the average? So you use sampling, and you do this until they get to the size. So you want to, if you're doing precision feeding, you probably want to sample their weight every week, at the end of, so you use a cycle, so Monday to Monday. So you do this, you're sampling on Monday this week, and you wait, you either do it next Monday the following week, or the next Monday after 2 weeks. That way you are adjusting the feed as they grow. And if the fishes in the pond are doing well, it means you should be seeing obvious increase in weight at every stage, both the sampled weight of all the ones you take and then the average weight. Yeah, this is based on the concept of biomass, which is the cumulative weight of each fish within the ecosystem, in this case a single pond. So you do this until grow out. Now this is feeding. Yeah, so this would reduce, of course, the issue with not having feed at the same time. Of course, I've talked about sorting. So once they've gone beyond juvenile, you need to sort, so that what you don't end up having is you don't end up having smaller fishes being cannibalized on, or smaller fishes not being able to compete for food. With that said, next thing I want to address is what are the things that promotes the fish to feed more. One is the quality of feed. Two is the size of feed. So quality of feed, if it's formulated, make sure you use a certified formula from the FAO or from the World Fish. Yeah, or if you have the expertise, you can use that. Or buy feed from reputable brands. There are many of them. Now, with that said, the next thing is the size. So usually once your fish have gone beyond juveniles, so around juveniles, you want to start feeding them with at least 2 mm. So once they've done from 0 to 4 months, you want to, from when you take them into your farm as juveniles, fries are fed on a different size. Once you hatch, we'll do a different video, but from juveniles, for the first 1 month, you want to feed them with around 2 mm. After the first 1 month, you should graduate to 3/4 mm. And then, of course, as you sort, you stay on that for another 1 to 2 months. And as you stay on that, so the first month, 2 mm, you stay on 3/4 mm for another, say 2 months. Yeah? So cumulative, this gives you, the fish are about 3 to 4 months old. Now, after the 3 mm, you have to graduate to 6 mm when they are around 5 months. And towards late 5 months, it may be prudent to go to 9 mm. Now, the reason for this is, one, they are getting adequate nutrition per episode of feeding, so that they take more of feed rather than water. So that's the first thing. We again have a schedule on this. So juveniles, for the first 1 month, 2 mm. After, by the second and third month, they go to 3 mm / or 4 mm. So by around the third month, they should be comfortable with 4 mm. By the 4th month / 5th month, they should be on 6 mm. Towards the end of the 5th month, they should go to 9 mm / 9 mm / or 6 mm, depending on the structure you have. The other thing, so I've talked about the quality of feed. I've talked about the size of feed, size, quality. I've also explained how to decide the quantity if you're using acceptability or precision feeding. The next thing that you need to understand is the importance of aeration, especially around feeding. So if you're farming at scale, especially when you cannot change water on a daily basis, then you have to strongly consider aeration. And if you do aeration, it's advisable to do it around the time that just before you start feeding, say an hour or 2. Now, the reason for that is it increases the dissolved oxygen. It also would drive the metabolism of the fish and improve their appetite. So once you fed, you also aerate a bit, because it's going to help drive their metabolism, and also is going to help reduce drive their metabolism and help them break down the feed. The aeration would also help the water in its attempt to manage waste by helping it break down the excess feed and the fish pool to less toxic. So those are the things. So this is feeding. The next is water quality management, which we don't have to overemphasize. Water should be changed, preferably if you have the means, at least once a day or once every 2 days. One of the things that helps with water change is if you can't change water, aeration may reduce the frequency of the need to change water. Also, not overfeeding and things like that would help that. Now, so water change. Control of diseases. So there are many things to control disease. So internal and external biosecurity. I'll talk on internal biosecurity. So new concepts like salt baiting. Use the appropriate dosing. So there's a dosing schedule for the amount of salt based on per liter. Now what you are aiming to do is salt baiting helps to destroy bacteria specifically, because people talk about a lot of things, but scientifically what it helps with is Aeromonas hydrophilia, which is a bacteria, and that bacteria generally cannot tolerate salt solution beyond 2%. So do not make your salt solution under concentrated, meaning it shouldn't be less than 1.5% and it shouldn't be greater than 2%. Now there's a way to do this. You can ask me, or it's there on the FAO website. The other thing is, if you over concentrate your salt beyond 5%, it's going to be harmful to the fish. So it's going to be similar to stunning them with salt. So understanding this is very key. Then, so this is biosecurity for prophylaxis. So salt baiting is good when you bring in new fish or you notice poor movement. So when you do other things, good feed management, water quality. Occasionally when you have outbreaks, of course, you quarantine, isolate, and then you inspect and decide what you think the problem is. So if it's looking likely bacteria, which is most likely, two of the commonest bacteria is Aeromonas hydrophilia and the Pseudomonas species. There are many options you can use, but one of them is tetracycline, oxytetracycline, and again, you treat that over 3 to 5 days. So one of the ways is to add it to the water. You can use medicated feeding if that were to happen. Of course, internal biosecurity measures, hand washing, cleaning of farming utensils. So this is, in summary, an important concept of preventing stunting. Now, let's talk a little bit about when stunting does happen. So there are two types of stunting. There's short term, which means stunting of a few weeks, between 2 to 4 weeks, and there's long-term stunting greater than 3 months. Short-term stunting is generally reversible up to 80%, so you can reverse the situation up to 80%. Long-term stunting, you probably won't be able to reverse it beyond 30%. So from a business point of view, long-term stunting, you probably need to decide, long-term grunting, if you like, or runting, you need to decide to do something else. So what does stunting mean? Stunting means the fish now, their FCR is so high that they use most of the feed to just survive. So in long-term stunting, their physiology has adapted so much that it doesn't convert most of the fish to flesh. It just keeps most of the feed to help them breathe, to help them poo, to help them do other things, but doesn't become flesh. So in long-term stunting, you want to exit the production as early as you can. In short-term stunting, you may try to salvage the situation. So this is, in summary, what we've talked about. So I've talked about stunting, runting of catfish, talked about targets of catfish and what you are aiming to get, the problem that stunting leads to melange, which again significantly means that you lose your investment and your profitability. And I've talked about the different stages and how to prevent stunting, grunting, runting, so seedlings feeding, water quality. I've talked about biosecurity, and I've gone to talk about feeding extensively, and I've talked about feeding based on acceptability and precision feeding or precision agriculture, and I've given you the percentages at different stages that you can use, and I've shown you how the calculations can be done and what you can instruct the farm workers to do. My recommendation is usually precision feeding, especially when you want to farm at scale. I've talked about all of this, and I've defined stunting and the types. I've talked about short-term and long-term stunting. Short-term stunting you can reverse in about 80%. Long-term struggle to reverse beyond 20-30%. So in long-term stunting or runs, you may want to exit the business early. So you may want to sell them as melange, or you want to convert them to smoking size and exit the market. Thank you.